Welcome to Glen Talks, where we delve into business with thoughtful leaders from around the industry. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Sharon Gregson, a dynamic force in the realm of childcare advocacy. And thank you so much for joining us, Sharon.
It's my pleasure.
Let's go into a quick update from you, just sharing a bit about your background and what really sparked your activism for affordable childcare. What's your story?
So I got involved as a childcare advocate back in the late 80s. I was a single parent with two young children, a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I knew I needed to, go back to school, get a good job. And I couldn't do that without access to childcare. And I very soon discovered that the only childcare I could find or afford was unlicensed care in somebody's basement. And it really wasn't high quality. So I discovered there are long waiting lists and high fees. And I instantly became an advocate because I knew it was an issue that impacted single mothers like me, but also impacted society in general.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And so how do you feel about where we've been and where we've come in terms of leading the way for making good changes for childcare in the province?
Well, in 2011, the Coalition of Childcare Advocates, who I work with, partnered with ECE-BC. So those are the early childhood educators of BC, the professionals who work in the sector. And our two organizations came together and decided that instead of just being reactive to whatever government was doing or not doing about the childcare crisis, we decided we would be proactive and put forward a plan on what childcare could and should look like in our province. And so that was the $10 a day childcare plan that was born from those discussions and through costing, through colleagues at UBC, knowing that parents didn't have to pay more than $10 a day. We could still have a quality childcare system where educators are fairly compensated. And so the campaign was born then, the plan was born, and we've come a long way since then. Particularly since 2018, we've made big progress. I'd be happy to talk about that.
Oh, perfect. So in terms of that progress, what were you and your crew able to advocate for, and how was it building that power and the momentum of that movement? And where did you start seeing your support from government starting to change?
Mm-hmm. Well, we released the $10 a day plan back in 2011, and we did consultations across the province, and we started to build momentum and start to build a constituency of people who understood that childcare didn't actually have to be such a crisis, that there were solutions, and we could look to other jurisdictions for how to do things differently and better. But it wasn't until John Horgan was elected Premier in 2017 that things really started to change, because he campaigned on delivering 10-a-day childcare plan, and people voted for him because of that. So starting in 2018, we saw fees starting to go down for families. We saw the creation of $10 a day sites. We saw wage enhancements coming for early childhood educators and a commitment to a massive expansion of spaces. So provincially, that was a big turning point for progress. And then in 2021, Prime Minister Trudeau realized that this was looking so good in British Columbia that he decided that he would sign agreements with all the provinces and territories and put $30 billion of federal funding into $10 a day childcare across the country. And so the combination of provincial funding and federal funding means that we've seen a lot of progress in our province. We still have a long way to go, and I can talk about what still needs to be done, but we have definitely seen progress.
Yeah. And how are we progressing in comparison to some of the other provinces?
Well, some of the other provinces, particularly the smaller provinces, have moved all their childcare to $10 a day. And some of them have already implemented wage grids for early childhood educators so that there's structure around building fair compensation for educators, because there's no sense us making childcare more affordable or creating more spaces if there aren't professionals to work in those programs. And so other provinces are further ahead than us on moving to 10 a day and implementing wage grids for educators. But BC is a big province, and there are some pilot projects happening. And so we're moving in a good direction. We're just not moving quickly enough to keep up with demand.
Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of people coming and joining our province monthly, and it's just exponential growth that we're seeing. So it's very hard to try and stay, I guess, ahead of some of that growth. And I guess we just have to plan it in that we're going to keep growing, and that's a good thing.
Well, we've always had long waiting lists for childcare. We've always had early childhood educators who were underpaid, and we've too often had programs that were low quality. And so since 2018, it's been a big ship to turn around to start building a system. So it's great that the funding is there. Now we need the policies and the infrastructure to actually build the system that BCers need.
So with that being said, government has a big role that they play in this. How can communities and businesses also contribute to making this more of a reality?
Well, government has the number one role to play because for decades, we've seen that leaving childcare to the marketplace and just hoping that a business solution arrives to solve the problem has been a complete disaster. We wouldn't have the mess that we have today if the market could solve the issue. And so like our education system for K to 12, it's early childhood education, needs a public solution. So publicly funded and publicly managed solution. So government does have the number one role to play. And we know that when more parents, particularly mothers, can participate in the workforce because they can use childcare, that they pay taxes, and that's good for local economies and good for government when they're collecting tax dollars. So there's still a role, though, for organizations and the business sector to play in facilitating growth by making sure that there's space available in the community for the expansion of childcare and for supporting the advocacy efforts of the $10 a day childcare campaign. And when businesses and organizations go to government with the list of their priorities, to make sure they add childcare investment to that list of what's a priority.
And how many groups have joined your campaign so far?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So the support for the 10-a-day plan represents about half of British Columbians. So if we look at all the municipalities that have passed resolutions to support $10 a day childcare, all the school districts, all the labor groups, the organizations across the province, the individuals that have signed a petition. It's a huge number of British Columbians that are sending a message to government that we want and we expect there to be quality $10 a day childcare available when we need it.
So if there's any organizations that are kind of watching this today, what's the easiest way for them to get involved and to put their voice to the rest of the list?
Right. So we hope that they do. And I would ask that they go to our website, 10aday.ca. You can sign a petition there as an individual. You can send us a note that your business or your organization or your group wants to be listed as a 10-a-day supporter. When you look at that list of who's supporting 10-a-day, it's now a question of who's not on that list and who wants to be on that list. So really encourage people to get a hold of us at 10aday.ca and let us know they want to be known to be a supporter of quality 10-a-day childcare. People can become members of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC. We're a small nonprofit organization with a big footprint, a big advocacy footprint. And so we encourage people to become members of our organization as well.
Yeah, I remember sitting it was a round table for childcare. And I think it was all union women, and it was held at the BCGEU. I think it was in 2012. And I was just so inspired by seeing the work that was being done. And it's just amazing to see just the exponential results that have happened with just being resilient and steadfast and getting a supportive government that's going to be able to get behind that. And it becomes a popular topic. Yeah, and you've made it popular. You've made it trendy.
Yeah, we have changed the landscape for childcare with our partners and allies. Childcare is now an issue that is at the forefront. Of all the recent provincial and federal elections, childcare has been a significant issue. People vote based on childcare now. It's not an invisible issue. people have an expectation when they have children that they pay taxes and they should have access to quality early childhood education for their kids, the same way they expect they have access to K-12 for their children. And for industries, it doesn't matter which industry. You know that you want your workforce to have access to childcare so that people can come to work. And that doesn't just mean childcare that's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That means more flexible childcare, non-standard hours of childcare to accommodate people who work early mornings and evenings, who have precarious work, who work rotating shifts. So there's a lot of ways we need to grow the system.
Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of the big elephant in the room, or the hair in the soup, as you say, because I mean, even just coming from a construction background, it's just, you just hear from your coworkers on having so many struggles on being able to have this. And these poor kids getting up at all different hours of the day and sometimes going to 2 or 3 different places of care. And it's very disruptive for them and their sleep patterns and everything as well. So what are some of those big issues that are still facing families when it comes to accessing the affordable childcare that's out there now?
So the childcare we do have is now far more affordable than it used to be. There are 14,000 $10 a day spaces in the province. And even for families who are not yet in a 10-a-day site, their fees are up to $900 a month less than they were. Mm-hmm. And so government has made good progress on affordability. They've introduced up to $6 an hour wage enhancement for early childhood educators. So they're making some moves towards recognizing it's a terribly underpaid sector for such important work. And they have funded the creation of thousands of new spaces. Unfortunately, the crisis was so bad that there's a long way to go to catch up. So right now, 75% of children ages 0 to 12 still don't have access to any form of licensed childcare. 75% of kids. So most kids don't have access to licensed childcare, despite most families having parents in the workforce. So expansion has to happen. It has to happen through school districts, through municipalities, through the health authorities. We need public planning for the expansion of childcare. We need to make sure that there's a wage grid for early childhood educators so that they are fairly compensated with good benefits and pensions for their important work. And we have to make sure that 10 a day continues to expand so that it is the norm, not just the exception.
So due to that increasing demand in childcare, new childcare spaces, as you said, are currently unavailable, like 75% of those, right? What are your thoughts on the limited supply and for new childcare facilities and the associated zoning issues? So a lot of times it's difficult even trying to get zoning to be able to make these spaces.
Mm-hmm. This is why it's important to have public planning, so that through primarily school districts, municipalities, and health authorities, post-secondary institutions, for example, there's public planning for childcare. And so it isn't just a matter of who's going to apply, who has to deal with zoning, et cetera. It needs to be done on a much more systemic level, the same way we think about where schools are going to be built, hospitals, libraries, community centers, not just left up to individuals to fill out application forms.
The afterthought. And a lot of the municipalities right now, they're moving towards these 15-minute city models. Have you been engaging with municipalities at all on this topic? Has it been?
Yeah, so childcare is a big issue for all municipalities and all school districts, frankly, because school districts are the ones who have already a mandate to care for and educate young children. So it's really, it's a good fit for school districts. In 2018, there were only 2 school districts that held licenses to operate childcare. Now there are 48 school districts. So that's really a lot of growth and a fit with their mandate. But municipalities have a role to play in facilitating zoning, facilitating space creation, ensuring that when new housing communities are built, post-secondaries are built, that childcare isn't just a little add-on, that it's integrated, and that there's enough childcare spaces to meet the demand of a housing complex, for example. So everybody has a role to play.
And what groups And people are particularly helpful in helping to get this progress done. Is there anybody that stands out for you that's been a really big champion and ally?
Yeah, so we have a lot of allies because this is sort of the big question is, well, why hasn't this happened sooner? So we do have a lot of allies, both politically, within the nonprofit sector, within the labor sector, and frankly, even within the business sector, because as labor shortages loom for many industries, there's a recognition that we need more women in the workforce. And those women are often mothers, and to go to work, they need access to childcare. And so I would say we have a wide swath of allies who have been integral in raising this as an issue.
Mm-hmm. So with 75% still going into private childcare right now, like how early then should parents be kind of going and looking for these options? I guess it's something that needs to be done, well ahead right now, unfortunately. But how early should they start making those preparations?
Right. So 75% of children don't have access to any licensed childcare. Right. So whether it's public or nonprofit or private, they don't have any access. And so parents need to start thinking about this right away. As soon as you find out you're pregnant, you need to start thinking about, well, where do I live? Where do I work? Where can I explore childcare options? Contacting their local childcare resource and referral unit to get a list of what childcare exists in the community, talking to your employer to see what benefits might be available around childcare, and getting on waiting lists as soon as you can. Sometimes you can get on a waiting list just with an expected birth date. Sometimes you need to have had your baby, but it is something that you need to plan for.
Do you have any other advice for parents who are struggling to find some options? Are there good resources?
I do have advice. So for sure, go to tenaday.ca and sign up to get our information, because we will let you know what's happening with Tenaday childcare across the province. We'll also let you know your opportunities to contact your local government officials, to have your voice heard, to let them know that childcare is a priority for you. And that's really important. As a former school board trustee myself, people need to know that it matters that you reach out and talk to your city councillors, your school board trustees, your MLA, your member of parliament. Let them know that you will be voting based on their commitment to expand Tenaday childcare. That really matters, and it's a powerful voice.
So where are some of the countries and jurisdictions that have a really great program going on right now, and what can we glean from them, or what can we identify who's implemented what?
Mm-hmm. So in the late 90s, Quebec was definitely the leader in Canada by implementing $5 a day childcare when they had Premier Lucien Bouchard back then and a female finance minister, Pauline Marois, who decided that access to affordable quality childcare was part of a family policy. And so Quebec has always led the country. Childcare now in their nonprofit world in Quebec childcare is $7 and change a day, so less than $10. And that's our campaign as well, that childcare should cost no more than $10 a day. So Quebec has a lot of lessons that the rest of the country can learn from. And they demonstrate in Quebec that once they had their $5 a day system, that 70,000 more women were able to access the workforce within 12 years, and the number of single parents on welfare dropped by 55%. So there was a lot to learn from Quebec. We also can learn from what's happened in the Nordic countries, in Denmark, for example, that has got a very public system. And we can learn from some of the mistakes that have been made in Australia, for example, where they went full on with corporate childcare and then the system collapsed and government had to bail out childcare programs. We can look to Europe, which has been further ahead on public funding of childcare. But what we're doing in BC is really a made in BC model. So we're not trying to copy anybody. We're taking the lessons to be learned and making recommendations to government on what good public policy should look like here.
How do you support the needs of single parents when childcare isn't available before their work hours?
Yeah, so that is a question that is not resolved because too often families who need childcare, and particularly who need flexible childcare or non-standard hours of childcare, have no options but to go to the unlicensed sector, which could be wonderful quality and could be unsafe. Top of mind for me is always the death of baby Mac, whose family had no options but to use an unlicensed childcare that was actually operating illegally. And so those are not the kind of tragedies that we want to see repeated in British Columbia. We want our early childhood education system to be high quality. We want it to be licensed. We want to be part of the education system. So it's a good move that childcare now is in the Ministry of Education. It's called the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And so we start to think more about universality and the rights of children to access quality services.
What kind of opposition have you run into over the years? And is some of this opposition coming from the privately owned childcares?
Mm-hmm. There is, I think, a misunderstanding that the market is going to solve this problem or any problem. And unfortunately, what we see from decades of observation in Canada and from lived experience is that the market has not solved the problem. So fees just keep getting higher for families. Wages have not kept up with living wages. And we see the huge demand, the unmet demand. And so the market has not solved the problem. It is an issue, just like our elementary schools, that needs public investment and public management. So some of the opposition has come from people who think that there should be a business model, or who aren't aware that we actually, in our plan, welcome in for-profit providers on a level playing field with the nonprofit sector, so that they can continue to provide childcare that is affordable and that pays educators fairly. Our position is that expansion, so new programs that are paid for with taxpayer dollars, should be in the nonprofit, Indigenous, and public sector. So there's less and less opposition now. In some provinces across the country, the opposition is because provinces are not putting adequate funding into operating. And so there's a backlash against that. And so we need to make sure that as government does invest in childcare, that they invest at a level that allows quality and allows for educators to be fairly paid.
Mm-hmm. It's one of our biggest investments is our children, so it's about time
you
we
would
start
think
making.
So. Yeah, a lot of people talk about children are our most important resource, so we need to start investing in them, not just when they turn 5 and start going to kindergarten, but thinking about the early years as well.
Mm-hmm. Are there any statistics for kids that have been raised without access to childcare in terms of?
Mm-hmm. So there are. There's something called the EDI, which is the Early Development Instrument, and it's a way of population measurement. It's done when children start kindergarten to see how well they are developing on 5 domains. So physical, cognitive, emotional, language, and social-emotional. And what we've seen over the decades is, while that instrument has been used, that measurement tool, is that the development of 5-year-olds has actually been going worse. There are more children who are vulnerable on those developmental domains. And so it shows that we need to be doing more around early childhood, supporting children, supporting their families. And that's quality childcare is one of the ways that we can support healthy families and support children's early healthy development.
And speaking about healthy development, what kind of challenges did COVID bring, and what sorts of extra things were brought to light and as a direct response to COVID? Because we all know that if you've got kids, you're more likely to get sick more often, and we hear a lot of kids getting sick and being at daycare. So was there anything that was particularly surprising during COVID?
Well, what the pandemic made clear is that childcare is not just nice to have, it's an essential service. And in fact, Dr. Bonnie Henry ended up referring to childcare as an essential service. Childcare really was impacted harshly by the pandemic because in BC, childcare programs for the most part stayed open. Early childhood educators put their own health on the line to work with children who often couldn't be masked. And so it took a toll on the childcare sector, which we're still recovering from. There's a lot of stress. It was a lot to ask around health and hygiene of early childhood educators, and really speaks to, the core service that childcare is for families.
One issue in the past has emerged with many children being hospitalized due to poor quality food in a childcare facility. Do you perceive this as a concern while advocating for childcare, for the compromises in quality?
Yeah, so there was recently a very serious health outbreak in Alberta around unsafe food and unhealthy food. We want to make sure that childcare programs are adequately funded that you can purchase.
So many private childcare centers are offering specialized courses for children's development, but these often come with a pretty hefty price tag. How do you propose addressing this while advocating for bigger changes in the programs that we see now?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, we want to make sure that families have choice within a quality system. And if we think about our K-12 education system, we have a public system where families can choose to send their children to their local neighborhood school. They also have the option of a private school. Interestingly, though, private schools are all nonprofits. So giving families different choices, but still within the nonprofit sector, and with reduced public funding. And so we want to make sure that those extra specialized courses that are being offered don't just become elitist, that it isn't just a matter of those who can pay $2,000, $2,500 a month for childcare are the ones who actually access childcare. We want to make sure that there's equitable access and that within that system we are still ensuring that there's choice and that's culturally safe for Indigenous children, for example, that welcomes in children with disabilities and with special needs. So we want to make sure it's a robust system where families can have their diverse needs met.
Mm-hmm. And choice comes down to a lot. And we've got a pretty significant year in BC with the upcoming provincial election. What have you been meeting with both sides of government, or there's another runner? There's four different groups running for the seat this year. So have you been meeting with these groups, and what would you like to see, and who has committed so far to do the most?
Right. So early days yet. We're waiting to see what comes out of the BC budget in February. Soon to come, yeah. So we'll be watching closely to make sure that government is building on its progress to date. So using federal funds and still augmenting that with provincial dollars, because it takes both the province and the feds to build a system. And for the provincial election, we will be making sure that $10 a day childcare is again an election issue. We think there's progress that can be made in 2024, that we expect government to make progress, particularly perhaps on school-age childcare. And we will be expecting and analyzing all four party platforms to make sure that they are committed to what the research and the evidence shows is the way to build a childcare system. And if they are putting forward a platform that's relying on disproven approaches to childcare, we'll be calling that out. And we will be making sure that people understand where childcare is profiled in each of the party platforms. We always talk to all members of the legislature. We're a nonpartisan group. We'll talk to anybody who wants to talk to us about childcare. That's something that we're quite famous for. So we'll talk to government, the opposition, we'll talk to the Conservatives, we talk to the Greens, we talk to everybody about childcare and expect them to put forward policies and platforms that are based on evidence and research and progress to date.
So you probably have a lot of stories though from over the years with your kids. Do you have any like real case examples as to why we need this level of childcare? I'm assuming you've got some pretty big stories and what we've heard from other people as well in your time.
Yeah. So I have my own horror stories of not being able to access quality childcare when my kids were little. And in fact, my grandson, who's 3 years old, wasn't able to get a licensed childcare space until his parents had already gone back to work. But that's just my story. Just this past weekend, I was talking to a group of immigrant and refugee women who newly arrived in Canada, who want to go to work here, who want to contribute to their community, who need childcare. And the stories are really sad of how these women are not able to participate in the workforce, not able to go back to school for English language training because they can't find or afford childcare. So as we welcome more families, more people into British Columbia and to Canada, we need to make sure that we're ensuring that they can be successful. And that means making sure that childcare is available, that it's high quality, and that it's no more than $10 a day.
Many places with zoning lack open playground spaces, limiting the approval of new childcare facilities. Is the government considering any innovative solutions to address this issue?
So I am an advocate for a lot of outdoor environments for children. Children need to be outside more. And we need to make sure that we're building climate resilient facilities as our climate changes, as we see all too soon here in BC. And so we want to make sure that the regulations for children's play space does not get any more weakened than it already is. The square meters that are required now for outdoor play are far too small. We need to make sure that we are doing better for children by supporting their outdoor environments. And we need to make sure that the outdoor space is high quality. So municipalities have got a role to play in ensuring quality areas are zoned for children's play space. But it isn't just a matter of putting childcare anywhere. We need to prioritize space for children. It needs to be in the communities that they live in. It needs to be available for families as they go to work. We need a huge growth in childcare, and we need to make sure that it's done well. The same kind of high standards we have for elementary schools that we expect families have access to beautiful learning environments for children, that the people who work in these environments have got space for staff rooms, that there's good outdoor space. Those things all apply for young children as well. It isn't just about putting kids anywhere where there happens to be some empty space. We've got to have environments that are designed well for young learners, young children.
And how can we increase the availability of spaces so people have options for their kids?
So this is where we need to have public planning. So a few years ago, the Union of BC Municipalities provided funding for about 70 communities across British Columbia to do childcare plans. So to do needs assessment, to look at what childcare they already had and what childcare they needed. So those plans are available now in 70 communities, and they need to be utilized. So there needs to be planning, whether it's in Sechelt or whether it's in Surrey or whether it's in Prince George. What childcare do we have? What more do we need? And where is there publicly available space, whether it's Crown land, municipal land, school district land, health authority land, post-secondary education land? Where can we create more quality childcare facilities? How can we utilize modular buildings so we can have high quality custom designed modular buildings like they're building in Fernie right now, where we've got childcare on the main floor with a beautiful outdoor environment and maybe housing for ECEs on the second or third floor. Modular buildings can do that. And so this takes public planning, making it a priority to expand childcare, and not just waiting for individuals or individual organizations to apply for money to expand, but actually determining how and where it's going to expand.
That's a fascinating idea with what's going on in Fernie. I'd love to hear more about that sometime. But is there any other pilot projects that are going on that are particularly exciting, and what are the most creative ideas that you've seen that have come out of this so far?
Well, the modular in Fernie is something that we've been advocating for years, custom designed modular. We had suggested to the province that they do a bulk purchase of modular buildings and then work with communities across the province to create childcare more quickly. And that's something that's entirely achievable. There are great partnerships happening with school districts. There's innovative work being done by government looking at an operating fund model to try and standardize childcare expansion through 10 a day across the province. We need to make sure that that's adequately funded so that programs want to be part of 10 a day and transition to 10 a day. Just last week, 700 more 10 a day spaces were announced. There's lots to be done. There's lots of work, and we know that folks within the ministry are working hard to expand childcare. We know that the politicians have set great goals for 10 a day, both provincially and federally. We just need that to happen more quickly to meet the demand that's coming from families. Right. So the research shows through the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives in their work that they've done to analyze fees across the country. If we look at British Columbia, fees on average are higher where there are communities with more for-profit childcare. So if we look at Richmond and Surrey, the fees on average are higher there than in Vancouver where there's more non-profit childcare.
Really? Interesting. So rent might be cheaper, but you're paying more for childcare.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your work. And I can just imagine how many long days, and sometimes just feeling like you're running into some walls with people, but eventually you're able to get through. And I thank you so much for that work. We're moving into a fun section, which is called our rapid fire section. So it's going to be between one word to one sentence.
Okay. I'll do my best.
Okay. So one of your biggest roadblocks you've encountered in trying to get to affordable childcare.
So people perhaps not understanding that the 10-a-day plan is not just about affordability for families, it's about fair compensation for educators and about enough spaces for all the families who want and need childcare. So 10-a-day is about more than just affordability.
One person you would like to sit down for coffee right now that's able to help make some big change.
David Eby, Premier Eby.
He's listening. Most memorable moment from your journey so far?
Two moments, I think. Seeing the Premier, Premier John Horgan at the time, in front of a podium that said 10-a-day childcare. And then in 2021, seeing Prime Minister Trudeau in front of a podium that said 10-a-day childcare across Canada.
Mm-hmm. And who's one of your biggest inspirations?
The colleagues that I work with, the Coalition of Childcare Advocates, many of whom have devoted their life to building a quality, affordable childcare system.
Great. One thing most people don't know about you. I lead a pretty public life, so that's hard to think about what people wouldn't know about me. I have 4 kids, 2 sons and 2 daughters who are pretty much grown up now, who are impacted by the housing crisis, and that I was born in England and I moved here as a teenager, perhaps. Oh, wonderful. If you can implement one policy change overnight, what would it be?
Okay, so here we go. So I want the Premier to tell all the school districts that they have a mandate to expand school-age childcare, that every elementary school needs to offer before and after school care to accommodate all the children in that elementary school. No elementary school should have waiting lists for school-age childcare. We've got those facilities. They're publicly funded schools. We need people working them who can provide care before school and after school. And it's doable quickly, and the Premier could make it happen.
Perfect. And if you wanted to add your voice to help get that policy done, where can they find that information?
So I encourage the audience to go to tenaday.ca, sign the petition, think about becoming a member of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates.
Thank you so much for coming. We have a nice gift to provide you. So just thanking you for your time and thanking you for your advocacy over the years.
That's very generous. Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And personalized, I believe, for you as well.
Well, that is very kind. Thank you very much. And thank you to GlenGroup for the opportunity to come and talk about childcare. I appreciate it.
That's our show for today. If you like the content that you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Share it with your friends and colleagues. We're going to continue to bring you inclusive insights and exclusive experiences. See you next time.